story. Dianne, good evening. And, thanks for your time tonight. I suppose a day in which they've been able to get through a lot. But when one looks at the kind of cross-examination that is taking place there, it really is going straight to the heart of the matters and very little dilly-dallying.
Yes, that's correct, Kathy. And I think probably partly because this has actually been to a certain extent ventilated before. When that conduct committee initially dealt with the complaint, some of these issues were placed on the record. But the issue that arose at the time was that there wasn't cross-examination as we saw today. So you wouldn't have had the same kind of situation where people were asked and asked again, what did you mean about this? Or what were you intending by this particular type of situation? So in fact, this is quite an unprecedented case in this instance, that we actually saw this where 3 judges were testifying and all 3 of them were actually cross-examined. Quite an interesting day in South African history, of course, because at the same time there's that case that was taking place in KZN, the Jacob Zuma matter, and it definitely didn't escape me that it was interesting that both of these matters were being heard today. One hopefully getting some finality today, and the other one continuing to kind of be postponed into the future.
Dianne, we'll look at the evidence of the Western Cape Judge President in a moment, but let's just review what came out of the cross-examinations of both Justices Jafta and Nkabinde. Interesting that they both have very different takes on their conversations that they had with John Hlophe and the extent to which he may or may not have been attempting to influence them. And of course, they stand on very different sides in terms of whether this complaint should actually be before the JSC.
Well, there's actually one thing that I tried to clarify after the proceedings with Advocate Norman, just to get clarity on why does it seem that they seem to be at odds with the rest of the judges. And Advocate Norman is actually clarified that they're not necessarily at odds with the rest of the judges of the court, but their issue is that they don't want to be identified as complainants in an individual capacity, because the complaint was always a complaint from the Constitutional Court. I think that was made quite clear in the evidence of Judge Nkabinde, although I'm not sure that point was really driven home in the evidence of Judge Jafta. Judge Jafta did say that he was quite reluctant to actually submit a complaint, but after discussion with the rest of the judges of the Constitutional Court, it was agreed that the court should complain. And that's really why you're seeing them represented by different lawyers and in a way separated from the rest of the court. However, they are saying that separation doesn't mean that they believe that there isn't cause for a complaint.
Let's talk about the evidence then by Judge Hlophe in terms of the room that he felt he had in bringing this conversation up to begin with some of the justices, especially somebody like Bess Nkabinde, who he wasn't necessarily close with in the way that he had been with Chris Jafta.
Yeah. Yes, and definitely, Kathy, I just want to get back to one point that was raised by Chris Jafta, which does link into this, is that Judge Chris Jafta did say that he and Judge Hlophe were friends, which is something that Judge Hlophe also spoke about, and that made that conversation, there was nothing untoward about that conversation on the version of Judge Hlophe. However, when Judge Jafta was questioned, he was asked, is it usual for judges to discuss cases in this manner? And he actually said that it was unusual. We then moved to the evidence of Judge Nkabinde, and she, as you said, was not necessarily a close friend of Judge Hlophe. However, he testified that he had spoken to her previously. He wanted to congratulate her as a black and a woman judge, and he had told her that he would visit her the next time that he was at the Constitutional Court, and he saw this conversation as him basically following through on that. But of course, something that was pointed out towards the end by the evidence leader was that, and in her words, she felt that Judge Hlophe was pushing for something in those conversations. And she asked him why, or whether it was merely a coincidence that Judge Jafta had warned Judge Nkabinde that Judge Hlophe might ask him about the Zuma case. and then in real terms he actually did ask about that. So in certain terms a bit of a difficult testimony to follow closely, because there was often reference to records that from previous proceedings, and of course if the viewers hadn't been following that very closely, they might be wondering, what's going on. But I think the real crux of the matter was brought up in some of that evidence by Judge Nkabinde as to why there ended up being a complaint. And she said, that she felt that Judge Hlophe did try to influence her. She felt that she had dealt with the matter when she rebuffed him, but then subsequently when there were discussions by the judges of the Constitutional Court, that is when the matter then escalated into a complaint, and there was an agreement that the full court should lay a complaint against him.
And that's really the nub of the issue, that collectively the judges of the Constitutional Court felt that there may be something for Judge Hlophe to answer to. Are we likely to see somebody like Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who was Deputy Chief Justice at the time, who made this decision alongside the then Chief Justice Pius Langa?
No, we're not going to hear from anyone else now. The evidence has wrapped up. Judge Hlophe was the single witness in his defense, and nobody else has called the other judges of the Constitutional Court, although they were represented here by Advocate Gilbert Marcus. And the panel has agreed that will be the end of it now. The lawyers are now going back to their various quarters to start putting together their final statements, which will be given here in this room on Friday.
All right, Dianne Hawker, let's leave it there for now. Dianne Hawker is our special projects editor. She's watching that Judicial Conduct Tribunal into the issue of whether the Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe tried to influence the judges of the Constitutional Court.